Hey, so how's it, guys? Welcome back to Freedom FANatics. It's a pleasure to be with you. Alongside me, I have my awesome colleague Sholin and Tiejo. And this week we've got some feisty topics to discuss. We're sticking with education, and to kick things off, we've got an article which Tiejo wrote as his first rodeo for FAN, and it is titled "Race-Based University Admissions Policies Are Not the Solution." Tiejo, let me not steal your thunder here. Run us through what you go on to say in the article.
Well, basically, the article looks at race-based policy admissions at universities such as Rhodes University, whereby the university has introduced quotas as to how many Black students could be accepted into the university, how many white students, colored students, Indian students, and everything of that nature. So in the argument, I argue that this simply continues to give life to racism, whereas we should all be focusing on eliminating racism from society as a whole.
For
So
sure.
that's the basics of it all, yeah.
Okay, cool. I think most freedom-loving South Africans would probably agree with that. I mean, Sholin, if you were to, I mean, you're currently studying at the University of Stellenbosch. I mean, do you think if you had to, proceed with postgraduate studies at Rhodes, do you think they would make you do a pencil test to see if you qualify?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm being honest, because Alex, generally race quotas are wrong, and I think that they don't focus necessarily on the abilities of students, but they instead focus on how dark the skin color is of a student. And if we're being honest, that's blatant racism right there, and especially with regards to people being divided into separate groups for specific events. I think someone like Henry Verwoerd, who did study at Stellenbosch University, who was an architect of apartheid, you'd probably be looking at his race obsession and think that these people are achieving the very racial division that he always wanted. And in the article, Diego touches on how they are trying to somehow like rectify, the mistakes of the past or whatever the case may be. And they are so obsessed with thinking that they are so progressive, and yet they are being regressive. And it's so ironic that they themselves cannot even see the blatant racism that they are taking a part of. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tiago, one thing that you mentioned in the article is that the policy itself, the wording of the policy says that you say it states in section 5 of its equity policy that it intends, among other things, outlining in its institutional development plan and in its transformation plans, processes that will result in the continued changing of the demographic profile of the South African student body to more closely reflect that of the population of South Africa. Now, we've seen this kind of thing. I mean, essentially, this is BE at universities.
Sure.
And one thing that you go on to say in as a sort of one thing that this policy maybe overlooks is that, if they were serious about it, maybe greater emphasis should actually be on the ability of people to enter the university system, maybe focusing rather on public and primary secondary schools, public primary and secondary schools rather, particularly those in rural and township areas. So do you want to take us through that, and how would better functioning schools in less resourced areas help solve this really, as Sholin says, Verwoerdian policy?
What funding, if we were to allocate more funding to township and rural area schools, we would enable these universities to get first and foremost facilities that they require so as to teach their learners, as well as the same way that learners in private schools in towns in former model C schools are taught, Secondly, they would be able to afford educators who, I mean, a lot of these schools don't even have enough educators. In Makana, for example, I know of a school that had not had a maths teacher in 2 years. That's insane. How do you then expect kids coming from that school to do well enough to enter into university, you know? So the whole argument is that if lecturers or university management are interested in
No, I think
sure.
no, I think that makes total sense. I mean, if lecturers are interested in actually pursuing excellence, you need a bit of a basis to start with, and essentially, I think basically, if the broadly there's a higher standard of education at a grassroots level, you will receive excellence shown.
Alex, yeah, I also wanted to mention something that you said that this is essentially BE for universities. And once again, like BE, even though it was intended to, help the majority of the Black population, well, the majority of the previously disadvantaged communities, what we actually saw is that it helped and benefited those who are politically connected instead. And I feel that we will once again see with racial quotas that the politically connected individuals will be able to get their kids into universities first before those who are actually disadvantaged will be able to get in. And that's also another thing I think we should be wary of when it comes to racial quotas, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think just to end off with this topic, Tiago, I think one thing that you point to in the article is the idea of merit. We've got the idea of meritocracy. Universities demand a high caliber of student, and obviously that's not to say that people who can't afford it aren't necessarily good students. And this is we'll tackle this in our next story, our news item for this week.
Sure.
But what happens to ultimately when we stop using primarily using merit as a metric for admissions? What happens to academic excellence? What happens to our universities in the long run?
I think that's a very important question. Exactly that. I mean, universities are there to produce knowledge, produce students who are able to produce knowledge that assist us as society in answering, in coming up with solutions to problems that we have in society. So when you do focus, when your job is to focus on producing students and graduates who will give answers to problems of society, you really should be, your entire mission should be to get the best students who can come up with these answers, not just anyone and everyone feeling sorry for people and bringing them in on the basis of previous disadvantages. It should be on the basis of that person producing knowledge that we need as society, and knowledge that helps us advance our standing as society. So yeah,
exactly. I mean,
sure.
ultimately, undermine excellence at the top, society as a whole is worse off. So it's a bit of a self-defeating policy in a way. So it's quite interesting. I think it's a very no doubt on campuses, this is something that's been debated a lot and will continue to be debated. And if anything, at least it brings out debates. And we want to hear your comments, obviously, of course. So yeah, leave a comment below. Find this episode on Instagram, Facebook, as well as YouTube. Let us know what you think. Drop us an email, info@f-an.net. And yeah, we'd look forward to hearing your thoughts. And I think closely linked to this topic, especially as we go into the university or the tertiary education year, universities start quite soon, is the issue of funding. Every January we have this issue, and our news item this week focuses on a protest. What would a new year be without a good protest? That was led by COSAS, and the story which we cite here from IOL is headlined: COSAS demands 10 billion rand from JSE companies to fund poor students in higher learning. So I'm gonna play a short clip from an interview from what I believe is the sort of chairperson of COSAS, and he is in conversation with Heidi Giokos from ENCA. So let's have a look what he had to say.
Nevertheless, we did exactly that. We marched to the JSC on Friday, and prior to that, we met with the executives of the JSC, Usisi Vuyoli, and we explained what is the intention of our march to the JSC. And it is quite clear that these mega companies in South Africa are not playing an active role in trying to better the conditions of lending in South Africa. Our quest in the JSE was very simple, to say the JSE listed companies with an understanding, of course, that the JSE is the market regulator of all these companies. These companies must play an active role immensely in trying to contribute to the development of education, particularly in terms of learners who are transiting from lower to higher education.
Cool. So, I mean, there you have it. So, part of some of their demands were that it was a bit tricky to discern. But what their main demand of the JSE was nothing less than 10 billion rand, which will be used for registration fees for first years in 2022 and application fees for 2023. I picked up somewhere else in another story that one of their other demands was 1 billion rand for students must be donated towards basic education. So just to put that in context, the education budget in South Africa is well into the hundreds of billions of rand. So first off, 1 billion rand is a bit of a drop in the ocean. But Sholin, I mean, you'll be back in class within the next week or two. Funding's an issue. Generally, there are a lot of bursaries going around. They're very competitive. But I think I want to take this conversation in the direction of the role of the private sector in funding education. I mean, we've seen that, NSFAS every year has its struggles. What are your thoughts? If you were on the panel with this representative from COSAS, what would your response be to his demands of the JSE?
Yeah, my response would essentially be that, demanding that businesses pay for the education of students who go study by choice. That's the real entitlement right there. Because I think, pursuing primary and secondary education is crucial. It's important. But getting a university degree is no silver bullet to rectify whatever inequality or, injustices took place in the past. That's no silver bullet. And as you mentioned, Alex, our education budget from the state in South Africa is what is in the hundreds of billions. And therefore, funding is not necessarily the problem, but it's the allocation and the management of that funds that is actually the problem. Because in many cases, there's people who are not qualified in positions to manage that funds. And that's why we see that literally money is going down per toilets, as one of our previous episodes where we actually discussed this very topic. And for them to, be demanding that tertiary education is so crucial and private businesses should fund it. In South Africa, approximately like only 6% of our population have bachelor degrees. And so that is, if you really want to think about it, that's a very a small group of individuals that actually have bachelor's degree and university degrees in South Africa. And we need to break off from this mentality that getting a university degree is the end all and be all of things, because many of us that finish graduate from university also end up struggling to actually find jobs. And that's the ironic part, that it's not just a free ticket and you will get a job. No, that's not the case. We should instead actually be incentivizing people to actually be entrepreneurs, because if you've noticed, like in some of the most successful people in the world, people like Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs were all college dropouts, and they became entrepreneurs. And that's the mentality shift I think we need to develop in South Africa, where we are not only employees, but we are employers, because that's where the real money actually lies. And that's why I encourage these individuals like the Co-SASA spokesperson. If you want private businesses to fund students, start your own private business and fund students.
I mean, Tiako, I think we can empathize with students and funding. I mean, funding is a difficult thing. I know a few years ago, there was almost stampedes outside the University of Johannesburg, people trying to just apply to make sure that the applications were sent through. NSFAS is not ideal. There are management issues, so one can understand their feelings about this. But I mean, if you look at some of the companies listed, or the holding companies listed on the JSE, I mean, there are companies that there's even private school, almost like privately funded school groups. There's things, there's restaurants, there's hotel groups, financial services, all these things that generate money in the economy. Is it the right approach to be approaching, or almost making demands, almost demonizing the private sector for what is ultimately a state failure and just a broader issue of South Africa, sort of the economy slowing down, less opportunities for people?
Certainly not. After watching that video, my conclusion would be that COSAs are a bunch of really entitled individuals who don't have the basic understanding of the economy, most probably as well. First and foremost, I think Sholene is correct in stating that the issue lies with how money is being managed by NSFAS, right? But the second issue is that we are funding qualifications that are simply not marketable. Qualifications such as sociology, politics, drama. Of course, we are not saying that these are not important qualifications, but we should be funding more skills-based practical qualifications that are in high demand, and therefore, given that they're in high demand, the graduates are able to find work after graduating and pay back the government money that the government then uses to fund the next generation of people who go into university. So one of the main issues here is that you have NSFAS that's funding everyone and anyone. A lot of people who are studying qualifications that are not marketable, they graduate, sit at home, they are not able to pay back NSFAS. NSFAS then doesn't have enough resources to fund the next cohort of students. But for COSAs to go to JSE protesting, demanding for 10 billion, it's insane, man. It's entitlement, it's lack of understanding that business owners can choose to disinvest from South Africa and invest somewhere else. There is really nothing special about us. There is nothing unique about South Africa. Nothing forces anyone to invest in this country. At any given point, they can disinvest. So to go to them making such demands really is really crazy.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much more to the story, and I think we could chat for hours about it. But I think on that note, I think it's time for us to get into even more fiery discussions. Next up, we have burning questions with Mbali. Ayo, fam. You're on mute.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Burning Questions. Thank you so much, Alex. Hi guys, welcome to Burning Questions, I guess.
That's it.
Thank you.
Good. I had so much to say during your guys' episode. I was like, let me hold it for this segment. So, guys, today on Burning Questions, we're just carrying on the conversation that you guys were actually having on education. So, code card of the week is from at Nelson Mandela. And it reads, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Very simple, straight to the point. And I think I low-key agree with him. Don't know about you guys, but we have a lot to chat about. You know, people did not hesitate on Facebook to share their thoughts. So we're gonna go to the first comment, which is very, very interesting. Hey, like it's yeah, very passionate as well. You know, we like it when you guys engage with us. Please don't stop doing that. So this comment comes from Bonga, and Bonga says, clearly Mandela did not intend for young South Africans to change the world via education. I mean, what very colorful word. What BS is OBE, or whatever their ANC prefers to call the South Africa's education system? Mandela and his generation were given the best education. This man is very learned. Bonga is very learned. This word is parochial, colonial, and by their best educationalist. Then they elected to close the door to that privilege. Bonga is saying quite a few stuff here, and he definitely disagrees with Nelson Mandela. That's what I'm getting. Sholin, I'll start with you. Any thoughts on this comment?
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts on this comment because there's a lot going on in this comment. But firstly, I do think that education is crucial. But for Bonga to just be accusing, and saying that Nelson Mandela and his generation got the best education, I'm not so sure about that. And then saying that, it's all about colonialism and parochial, whatever the word is he's using there. I feel like that's a very wrong statement to essentially to make, because I feel like when Nelson Mandela he became president, a lot of more people actually got access to education. A lot of black, colored, Indian students actually got access to better education. And as we have progressed and the management of the country has changed from, Zuma to Cyril Ramaphosa, things have gotten worse, and we can essentially see that decline through our matric pass rates that have consistently declined. And so clearly we were at a standard, and that standard has clearly dropped. So so I don't think that Bonga should just dismiss Mr. Mandela's quote like that.
Okay, but then when, as you're saying that the standard has dropped, so do you agree with him when he says that OBE is BS? I'm not going to say that on a, family show, but yeah.
I'm not really sure what he means by OBE.
So I think OBE is not like the education system, I think.
Yeah, it's an education system. I think it went out in 2008, if I'm not mistaken. Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah. So I'm not really familiar with that, but I mean the education system is basically declining overall, I have to say. So he is correct in saying that. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on his opinion.
On Bonga. Okay. I think let's go to the second comment, which I will ask Alex to share his thoughts about this particular one. So this one is from, that name, I think everyone at home can see it. Public school education turns people into colonial slaves. Not every change is good change. I'm very offended because I went to a public school. The fact that maybe it was a war school instead of a high school, maybe that made it better. But Alex, your thoughts on this is basically attacking public schools. Please save us.
Oh man, yeah, it's someone who also into public school. I'm offended. No, I guess I think maybe something important to take into consideration here is if we kind of need to think of ourselves as privileged in the sense that we are part of the 50% who started grade 1 and actually made it past grade 10.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We are part of the, I think thereafter it's something like 30 or 40 odd percent who then go on to actually matriculate. So the public schools we went to certainly geared us for a working life, for the daily grind, and gave us certainly prospects at a better future. But for the majority of South Africans, look, I wouldn't say colonial slaves. I think it's kind of misdirected here.
Yeah.
You know, but I think the comment that you know, people aren't. An important thing, a metric that is often measured by, instead of unemployment, is the labor market absorption rate. And that is basically just how many people can be taken into work. And I think there's a good argument to be made that our schools just really aren't equipping people to be able to enter the workforce. And notwithstanding all the things that we discussed earlier on in Freedom FANatics.
That is definitely true. And I think the last comment, we can have a round table, but then I'm going to start with Diego and hear his thoughts on this particular one. So this comment comes from Belinda, and it reads, but governments don't want the masses to be educated because they will know they are being used and being abused. Yes. Governments need the people to be ignorant and poor in order to bend them to the government's will. Yeah. Diego, I have a lot to say, but I'm going to give it to you. What are your thoughts on this comment?
Well, I think perhaps this is true in the South African context. The quality of our education is not to the par. And it is quite clear that part of why the government of the day is not improving the quality of our education is so they stay in government, so people stay uninformed, not understanding how things such as the economy function, and therefore carry on voting for them. But of course, this is a tactic that all communists have across the globe really have always used. They've always used education to keep people under the table. Sure. So I do agree.
Definitely. Yeah. So I think it all links into say education is definitely important. Charlotte and Alex, maybe last thoughts on this comment here.
I think.
Go first.
Yeah, I definitely think that keeping the population uneducated definitely works for those in power, because once the population essentially starts being able to think critically, then people will really be able to realize where the problem lies, who is the problem essentially. And for the ANC government, that will not be good, because everyone will be able to see, this is where our problem is, and this needs to be replaced. So they definitely thrive off people being ignorant.
Which is sad. Which is really sad. Alex, your last thoughts?
Yeah, my final thoughts. Two comments. The one is, I don't think that, I think I said recently on a different platform that in South Africa we need to be wary of. We kind of sit on a fence of incompetence versus malice. I don't think the government willfully wants to keep people uneducated. I think it's actually just comes down to incompetence, comes down to greed, those kind of things.
But I feel like they do. I low-key think that's part of their plan. But yeah, carry on.
I would also
go for it. No, Valia, no, go for it. I think let's chew on that for a bit.
I would actually want to come back on Alex.
Yeah.
Just to say sorry that they know exactly how to steal money, but they don't know how to run the education system. That's sus to me, bruh. But
exactly, you need to be educated in order to know how to steal this money. So obviously, these people do know that. You know what? Let's use education as a weapon.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should remember. I think we should remember that the government of the day subscribes to communism and socialism in a way, and they have this policy stance of theirs that's called the National Democratic Revolution. So they are working towards ticking off the boxes on whatever goals they have on the NDR. And part of getting there is feeding people a particular set of education, a particular education, so they end up subscribing to what you stand for as an organization as well. So I think a better way of rephrasing it would be that they are deliberately teaching South African learners to become communists in a way. We are more and more moving towards that. You check in high schools, content that's provided, in varsities, content that's provided. I mean, even medical students are now forced to take some social sciences courses such as sociology, which really are there to teach you to think like a Marxist. And yeah, we are more and more moving towards that. And I think it's a deliberate move on the part of the government, sure.
Yeah, definitely. Alex, I think you can finish your point. Sorry, we bombarded you like that.
No, not at all. No, I think those are also good points. I think maybe we next week we can discuss it, but also something important to watch out is the Department of Education looking at revising the history curriculum. Now that's a very scary concept, and I think something that we should look out for. But I think it's kind of back to my initial point, is that it's another state function that is failing, and it's desperately sad. And I think one thing in terms of politically, it may not in the long run benefit the ANC, because people do vote according to their living standards. As people's standards have dropped since 2007, support for the ANC has declined. So maybe it's kind of a cycle that might end up with the ANC's demise. But unfortunately, a lot of South Africans will fall by the wayside with very little prospects of any getting a real useful education.
Yeah, definitely. I think, we kind of survived, that education system. So you'll be safe. All those who are still in school, good luck. All the best. But guys, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. And you at home, catch this show every Tuesday on YouTube, Facebook, and IGTV. Remember, your freedom is worth fighting for.